one of the most chilling and notorious serial killers in history, Edmund Kemper III, the inspiration for the character of Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
If you don't recognize that movie, your parents' racing skills are very questionable. You need to go and see it and then come back. Ed Kemper's infamy isn't rooted merely in the number of his victims or the brutality of his crimes. Instead, it stems from his unnerving composure during his heinous acts and the cold, detached manner in which he recounted them to interviewers. This eerie calmness and emotional detachment offer a disturbing glimpse not only into his own psyche, but also into the dark recesses of the human mind, shedding light on the psyche of serial killers who follow in his footsteps. Let's have a look how this despicable human being fueled Hollywood's craze for serial killers and changed the way FBI and police investigate them. While most serial killers have IQs ranging from 70 to 90, Edmund Kemper stands as a stark exception, with an IQ measured at 145 and only a 9th grade education. His intellect prowess was extraordinary. Experts speculate that had he pursued higher education, his intellectual ranking might have soared even further. This cognitive brilliance, contrasted with his horrific crimes, made him one of the strangest paradoxes in criminal history. A man who murdered 10 people, including his own mother, yet play a pivotal role in aiding the FBI to understand the criminal mind. Telling Ed Kemper's story isn't merely telling the tale of a killer, it's a profound exploration of how Edmund Kemper's dark shadow stretches far beyond his crimes. His chilling persona etched itself into Hollywood's psyche, breathing life into the infamous character of Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. And beyond the silver screen, his own psychological insights help shape the very foundation of modern criminal profiling. Today his legacy lives, a haunting testament to the fragile boundaries of the human mind, influencing both law enforcement strategies and the fabric of popular culture. Kemper was born in Burbank, California in 1948. At birth, he nearly killed his mother, weighing 13 pounds that almost broke her in half. This ominous event foreshadowed her fate at the hands of her own son. The origins of a serial killer remain elusive, though certain behavioral foundations are often present. A key factor is psychopathy, a trait that can be functional and even advantageous and positive in positions of leadership. However, when combined with trauma and a repressive sexual environment, these traits can twist into something far more sinister. Vengeance and distorted sexual desires may evolve from dark fantasies into brutal realities. In Edmund Kemper's case, his complex psychological makeup and upbringing had all the ingredients necessary for such a descent into violence. So let's go over them. In his youth, Kemper engaged in disturbing rituals with his younger sister dolls, culminating in the removal of their heads and hands. On one occasion, when his elder sister, Susan Huey Kemper, teased him and asked why he didn't try to kiss his teacher, he responded, "If I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first." Kemper recalled sneaking out of his house armed with his father's bayonet and going to his 2nd grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows. He exhibited antisocial behavior such as cruelty to animals. At the age of 10, he buried a family cat alive, dug up his body, decapitated it, and mounted its head on a spike. Kemper later stated that he derived pleasure from successfully lying to his family about killing the cat. At age 12, his parents divorced, and Kemper ended up living with his mother, Clarnell, in Helena, Montana. He had a severely dysfunctional relationship with her, a neurotic, domineering alcoholic who he claims frequently belittled, humiliated, and abused him, leading to low self-esteem when regarding his interactions with women, creating a mental barrier between him and his object of desire. Clarnell often made her son sleep in a locked basement because she feared that he would harm his sister. She would often smack him for the slightest act of insubordination. Kemper would face humiliation when expressing his fears of debasement, a double punishment from his mother fueling the hate. Kemper also claims that she told the young Kemper that he reminded her of his father and that no woman would ever love him. Finally, he was sexually molested by an older cousin, which probably sealed his fate as a serial killer. According to psychological analysis, his highly developed intellect hid under his mother's hatred his unsatisfied desire for women, justifying his killings as the ritualistic killing of his mother, when in truth, he wanted to control, possess, and consume his victims, literally eating them in the ultimate sexualized expression of conquest. At the age of 14, they shipped him off to live with his paternal grandparents, who live on a ranch in the foothills of Sierra Nevada, on Road 224 about 2 miles west of the town of North Fork. Kemper described his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother emasculated him. On August 27, 1964, at the age of 15, Kemper killed his grandmother, Maud Matilda, with a rifle after an argument, shooting her once in the head and twice in the back, then stabbing her several times. When Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Kemper Sr., came home, Kemper fatally shot him in the driveway. Kemper phoned his mother, who told him to call the police. Kemper did so and waited for them to arrive. When asked why he did it, he told police that he just wanted to see what it felt to kill Grandma, and later said he killed his grandfather because he would be angry with him. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County. One of Kemper's most significant contributions to criminal profiling was his role in shifting the mindset that physical characteristics such as face symmetry, yes, at some point ugly people were more likely to be charged with murder than pretty people, race or socioeconomic status could automatically exclude someone from being considered a suspect, or in his case a monster, at 15 years old. In fact, a cornerstone of the FBI training program on pattern killers, later classified under the term serial killers, was to confront and dismantle local police biases. Specifically, it challenged the prevailing assumption that middle-class white men were unlikely to be murderers. This transformative shift was underpinned by extensive psychological research, laying the groundwork for what eventually evolved into the practice of criminal profiling. Sadly, police is full of bias still. For example, when the victims are poor or working girls, they get little to no resources from the police to solve their cases. Some real examples of this is the Long Island killer, who was caught with evidence stored by the police for close to a decade, never looked at it because the victims were call girls. The Highway of Tears killers, 80+ victims, prostitutes and runaways, still at large today with little or no attention from the authorities. You get the point. Criminal profiling was never intended as a direct tool to preemptively capture serial killers. Instead, its purpose was to broaden investigative scopes, ensuring that no segment of the population was overlooked during criminal investigations, which basically was a scream saying, a monster can be anybody, and most likely, due to population composition in the 1970s, it was statistically more probable for it to be a white middle-class man. Going back to Kemper. At Atascadero, California Youth Authority, psychiatrists and social workers disagree with the diagnosis provided by the court experts. They observed a cool-tempered young man and subsequently re-diagnosed him with a personality trait disturbance. This re-evaluation ultimately paved the way for him to regain his freedom. During his time at Atascadero, he took his first IQ tests, scoring 136, and later improved to an impressive 145. Demonstrating exceptional verbal articulation, he earned the respect of the staff, who facilitated his training in the field of psychology. With access to a wealth of literature, he collaborated with psychiatrists to develop new psychological assessments, including innovative tests on scales for the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, notably creating an over-hostility scale. He later revealed that this knowledge enabled him to manipulate his psychological evaluations, ultimately securing his release. Numerous studies have established a correlation between frontal lobe lesions, low IQ, and traumatic childhood events, which can lead to the development of a serial killer. Other fringe studies have found statistical correlations between high lead intake and the mass distribution of LSD during the 1960s and 1970s, which contributed to a surge in serial killers during those decades. However, surprisingly, very few of these individuals were ranked as having genius-level IQs. Among them are Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and our subject, Ed Kemper, but only Kemper had the awareness and knowledge to analyze even himself. Once free, he had a different array of odd jobs, but at the end he returned to live with his mother. He managed to save enough to buy a car, a yellow 1969 Ford Galaxie 500 with a black hardtop. He started going to the jury room, a bar usually crowded with cops. He tried to become one, but couldn't because of his height. Nevertheless, he befriended several of them at the bar. This would later serve him to get inner knowledge on how to avoid getting caught. Even though the hippie movement was getting popular, he kept himself clean-cut and became a supervisor at the Highway Service Office. During this time, he had his first experience at giving rides to hitchhikers. In his words, he could come across as normal, but the fantasies of possession, control, and sexual gratification started growing stronger. On May 7, 1972, he would kill for the first time to satiate his sexual desires. Let's hear him describe the scene.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area, even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady. I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women, and I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. At first there wasn't a gun. I'm driving along. We go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, where I could act out, and I say, no, I can't. And then a gun is in the car, hidden. And this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides. This fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me. It was like drugs. It was like alcohol. A little isn't enough. At first it is. And as you adjust to that psychologically and physically, you take more and more and more. It's the same process. So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out, something has to happen. It was going to happen. I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun that got us all.
On one occasion, Kemper picked up two roommates in Berkeley.
In that first killing in May of '72, when that gun was pulled out, I launched it out. I had it under my leg, out of sight, parallel to my leg in the seat. It was something that had been thought out in fantasy, acted out, felt out hundreds of times before it ever happened.
Kemper drove them at gunpoint to a secluded area near a park. He took one of them into the woods, leaving the second girl tied in the car.
I just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate, stabbing her. And I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell on me. Everybody's gonna get me. She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? She pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that? I couldn't deal with telling her that. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on. It knocked her right up into the lid of the car, but it didn't pierce the clothing. It's a Wasn't that swell a knife anyway. I went out and bought a pawn shop huge knife. And I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk. I just killed a young woman. I slammed down the lid of the trunk. She isn't dead, she's dying. And I panicked. I thought I just locked the car keys in because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk. I'm kicking on the trunk lid and yanking on it. Oh no, I don't believe this. I started to run and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there. I stopped. I said, stop and think. I collected my wits. Check all your pockets. I picked the gun up. I stuck it back in my pants, now remembering I had one. I checked all my pockets, and there's the keys in the back pocket. I never put them in my back pocket.
Everyone makes mistakes, and that's what we have to hope for. The more mistakes they make, the better their chances.
I thought I was pretty slick, and went and tripped all over myself. That first 2 murders, the first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted, and I wasn't. Because 3 different individuals or 3 different groups of people got scared and minded their own business and looked the other way.
Some of the people who are committing murders, even as we speak, if they're doing it by themselves and they tell no one about it, they could go on undetected until they decided to stop. And the police wouldn't catch them unless we just happened to roll up on them while they were doing it.
Even after police warnings against hitchhiking and an increased bus schedule on the campus, Kemper had no trouble picking up hitchhikers.
The crimes grew more brutal, and Kemper dismembered bodies, hid trophies, and even engaged in necrophilia and cannibalism. But what set him apart from other killers was his analytical mind. He studied police reports, memorized their routines, and even drank in bars frequented by officers, where he listened to conversations about the co-ed killer case. He later described how surreal it was to sit among the very men trying to catch him. By April 1973, Kemper had killed 4 co-eds. But one last time he gave a ride to 2 girls. He was running an experiment this time, to see if he could control his impulses to kill. He took the ladies to their destination, and as they say goodbye, he knew that his craving could only end if he turned on the person he hated the most, his mother Clarnell. He bludgeoned her with a hammer, cut off her head, and placed it on a shelf. He screamed at it like she was still alive, as if finishing the endless arguments of his childhood. Afterwards, he invited her best friend over and killed her as well, staging it to look like a double disappearance. Then, strangely, he drove aimlessly for days before finally calling the police from a payphone. He confessed calmly and completely. The officers at first thought it was a prank, but Kemper led them to evidence, and then the truth could not be denied. At his trial, Kemper waived any attempt at an insanity defense. He told the jury exactly what he had done, and the jury sentenced him to life in prison. He was sent to California Medical Facility in Vacaville, where he remains to this day. In court, he confessed to dismembering the bodies of his victims, having sex with corpses, keeping heads to engage in oral sex, and later burying them in his backyard. He stated that he was amazed he hadn't been caught earlier, as he chopped up bodies on his backyard, only hidden by the shadows of the night at plain sight. In his words, I quote, "Nobody cared." For Kemper, prison became something unusual. Instead of withdrawing, he began to talk, and the FBI was willing to listen. In the mid-1970s, the FBI faced a daunting challenge. Serial killers were terrorizing America, and law enforcement had no specific framework to understand their behavior. Investigators often defaulted to the usual suspects: drifters, minorities, disfigured individuals, or homeless men, frequently ignoring evidence that pointed beyond these stereotypes. To address this, the Behavioral Science Unit, BSU, was established by Robert Ressler and John Douglas. Their mission was to develop psychological profiles of offenders, aiming to shift law enforcement focus from preconceived biases to objective evidence. However, their efforts met a significant obstacle: denial. Psychopaths typically lack remorse, not because they are unaware of their actions, but because they disassociate from responsibility. They often attribute their crimes to external influences, like "my mother drove me to it," "the girl asked for it," or "a demon told me to do it," creating a barrier between the real motives and the actions. But Edmund Kemper stood apart from other serial killers. Unlike many, he engaged in self-psychoanalysis, offering rare insights not only into his psyche but also into the minds of others. His correspondence with other notorious criminals, such as the Son of Sam, showcased his analytical prowess. Kemper's desperate need for recognition wasn't rooted in his crimes, but in his intellect capacity. What made Kemper particularly valuable to the VSU was his duality. He demonstrated the meticulous planning of an organized serial killer while also articulating the chaotic rage that drives disorganized offenders. His introspective nature provided a unique lens through which the FBI could better understand the complex psychology of a serial killer, bridging gaps in criminal profiling during a critical era. Amid this backdrop, Ed Kemper provided the FBI with invaluable insights. He welcomed agents with a calm demeanor, speaking at length about his thought process, meticulous planning, and the dark fantasies that fuel his actions. Kemper detailed how he masked his intentions, leveraged charm to disarm victims, and how deep-seated resentment towards his mother influenced his crimes. His articulated, composed nature set him apart from many offenders, offering clarity rather than confusion, not only about himself, but about other killers also. Through Kemper, the FBI learned how fantasy fuels escalation, how offenders mentally rehearse their crimes, and how narcissism can ultimately be their downfall. He was, in effect, a living textbook of murder. One of his most chilling insights on the duality of serial killers, given by Kemper as he explained how he could function undetected by society, was to say, "When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to be really nice and sweet. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick." He proceeded to describe how he had sex with corpses, searching through his past what event could have been the onset for such desires. He explained how he relived his fantasies and the experience of killing through souvenirs, why he kept the heads and buried them looking up to him. He indulged in cannibalism, the ultimate form of possession, in his case sexually driven. Not only that, but honestly searching through childhood experiences to tie them up to trauma or accepting them just as an expression of lust. It was this shocking honesty, spoken without emotion, that made him both terrifying and useful for the FBI. He coined the legendary concepts, such as the idea that offenders often return to the murder scenes to relive their fantasies, or blend into the crowd as the police unveiled the crime scene. The FBI used this knowledge as a critical reference point when studying other offenders. Insights from Kemper influenced the profiling of notorious criminals like Ted Bundy, Dennis Rader, and countless others. Although he never directly solved the case, his words significantly shaped investigative approaches in the late 20th century. His influence was so profound that John Douglas later admitted that sitting across Kemper was like staring into the abyss. Kemper's story might have ended there, in FBI files and criminology textbooks, but Hollywood found him impossible to ignore. Today, Ed Kemper is in his 70s, still serving his life sentence in California. He has expressed regret, but whether that regret is genuine or just another layer of his narcissism remains debate. To criminologists, he is remembered as a cornerstone case that shaped the FBI understanding of serial offenders. To the public, he is remembered through the lens of pop culture as Hannibal Lecter, as the towering figure from Mindhunter, as proof that evil can wear a calm and intelligent face. Ed Kemper murdered 10 people, but his legacy reached far beyond prison walls. He became the stark reminder that evil comes in all shapes and forms, and no amount of intelligence or rationale can stop it when it rages in the soul of a person.
The Book of Files!